Hey friends, welcome or welcome back. My name is Shannon, and today we are going to talk about some Jane Austen nonfiction. Now, as you may be able to tell from the name of my channel, I am a huge fan of Jane Austen, and I am always reading her fiction, but I also love to read nonfiction about Jane, her works, and the time period in which she lived. Today, I want to talk about some nonfiction that I have in my collection that I have not yet read. I do have another video planned to give some recommendations on some nonfiction books about Jane and her work that I have read, and that will be coming soon. But today, we're just going to go over, I think, about 10 books in my collection that I haven't gotten to yet, but I am really, really excited to share with you. The first is Jane Austen, The World of Her Novels by Deirdre Faye. And this is a very beautiful book. The pages are absolutely gorgeous. This is just what it says, a book about the world in which Jane Austen lived, specifically in the Georgian period of England. Now, Jane is considered a Regency author, and the Regency is a time period within Georgian England where George III was mentally ill, and thus his son, later to become George IV, was regent for several years before George III passed away. So Jane was born in the late 1770s, so she straddled centuries. And though her books were published during that small Regency period, only 3 of them were actually written during the Regency period. The other 3 were actually written before then during the, George III period. And this is just going over all sorts of things as foreign affairs, fashion, social rank, which is very important in her novels, transportation, candle etiquette, sanitation practices, and this will just give a better understanding of the world in which she was writing. Because remember, Jane was a contemporary author. She was writing about her times and her life and her observations of her time period. Next is The Making of Jane Austen by Devoney Lucer. And this is basically going through how Jane became so popular, how she became the celebrity that she is today, and how people read her widely, study her widely, travel to Bath and have Jane Austen festivals. How did that happen? When did that start? So Devoney Lucer is going through that whole period, starting with the Austen influencers, including her first English illustrator, the eccentric Ferdinand Pickering. And then she goes into some actresses who started pioneering dramatizations, leading thousands of young women to ventriloquize Elizabeth Bennet's audacious lines before drawing room audiences. And then she talks about people who started writing dissertations and then movie adaptations, and then going through the whole arc as to how she became so popular and why there are so many books about her and movies and retellings and television shows that exist today. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. Next, we have Jane Austen and the Price of Happiness by Sigrun Brodey. And this is about Jane Austen's endings, the endings to each of her story. And if you have read all of her books, you know that her endings are actually a little bit unsatisfying. They are, they're not like that happy romantic ending that all the movies portray. They're actually very sparse, very ironic. And okay, so here's what she says. How did Jane Austen become a cultural icon for fairy tale endings when her own books end in ways that are rushed, ironic, and reluctant to satisfy readers' thirst for romance? I encourage you to go back and look at all of the endings, because they do not end with that happy reunion and the couple, telling each other how much they love each other. I would suggest even going back to Sense and Sensibility, probably one of my personal most unsatisfying endings as it pertains to Marianne, and how, you know, Marianne, not that she was forced to eventually marry Colonel Brandon, but it really is not that grand passion, grand romance that people kind of think happens with her and Colonel Brandon. And I know sometimes the movies show them falling in love, and that doesn't actually happen at the end of Sense and Sensibility. So go back to Sense and Sensibility and check out that ending. Same with Mansfield Park with Fanny and Edmund. Very unsatisfying lovers coming together. You know, Edmund just one day woke up and was like, huh, I should probably marry Fanny. You know, like, so not the grand romance. And this book is going to tell me, you know, all about that and how intentional Jane was for those endings. Next is What Jane Austen's Characters Read and Why by Susan Ellen Ford. And as you know, if you've read Jane Austen, all of her characters do read something, and those choices in reading materials are very, very deliberate, and they say something about the time and about that character. I mean, Northanger Abbey in itself is a book about books. So many books are mentioned in that, and each person, their choice for the particular books that they read is just very, very intentional, and it tells you something about that character. So I'm actually really excited to get into this book here. Next, we have The Real Jane Austen, A Life in Small Things by Paula Byrne. And this is a biography about Jane Austen. I have read a couple of biographies. One that I recall being the biography by, I believe, Claire Tomalin. And it was so long ago, I actually can't remember how I felt about that biography. But Paula Byrne is a well-known biographer, and she's also written the next book that I'm going to talk about here in just a minute. So I am looking forward to reading Byrne's work. Next, we have The Genius of Jane Austen, Her Love of Theater, and Why She Works in Hollywood. And this is also by Paula Byrne. And this is very exciting because I love the theater, I love Jane Austen, and Paula Byrne is combining them. Jane Austen was very well versed in theater. She loved going to plays, and there's several references in her letters to Cassandra of plays that she saw when she was in London. And she even puts plays in her work. Mansfield Park, there is a dramatic section about the young people putting on an inappropriate play in the house. And it was a very deliberate scene there. And I have heard some scholars say that Mansfield Park in itself is kind of like a play. You have people in, you know, on stage and off stage and slamming doors and upstage and downstage and doing all sorts of theatrical things. So I'm really interested to see what Paula has to say about that. And I think there's also a section where Byrne will go over all of the adaptations that were in existence at the time this was published. And I'm not entirely sure when this was published. Basically talking about why her adaptations work so well in Hollywood. So that'll be interesting and will sort of fit well probably with the making of Jane Austen, who I'm sure will cover some of that as well. Next we have The Darcy Myth, Jane Austen, Literary Heartthrobs, and the Monsters They Taught Us to Love by Rachel Feder. I really think this is going to be funny. Why do we believe against all evidence that someone who's constantly low-key negging us and only texts back after midnight is suddenly going to turn into Mr. Darcy? We think this because of Mr. Darcy, that's why. Literature is full of lies. Jane Austen didn't invent the slow burn, enemies to lovers plot, and she's not totally responsible for the dangerous messages it perpetuates. But if we're ready to undo the damage literature has wrought on our relationships, Pride and Prejudice is a good place to start. Okay, I mean, we're we're all guilty of that. We're all guilty, all right. I'm just speaking for, my own experiences as a straight female that, yeah, I was always hoping that that guy who just was ghosting me was just, gonna pull through. He was gonna pull through. He was gonna turn into Mr. Darcy. He was, that enemy was going to be my lover. We're guilty of that. And, it's been perpetuated throughout literature, throughout movies, and everything like that. So I am actually intrigued as to what she says about that. Next, we have character and conflict in Jane Austen's novels, A Psychological Approach, and this is by Bernard J. Paris. So now we're getting into delving a little bit into the text, which I'm really interested in. And here, Bernard J. Paris offers an analysis of the protagonists in 4 of Jane Austen's most popular novels. His analysis reveals them to be brilliant mimetic creations that often break free of the formal and thematic limitations placed on them by Austen. He uses Northrop Frye's theory of comic forms to analyze and describe the formal structure of the novels, and Karen Horney's psychological theories to explain the personalities and inner conflicts of the main characters. So I'm really, really intrigued in that. So nice little psychological lesson for Jane Austen's characters. Okay, so this next one is my favorite title of them all, and that is Bitch in a Bonnet. Reclaiming Jane Austen from the stiffs, the snobs, the simps, and the saps. And this is by Robert Rodi, and there are 2 sections, 1 and 2. So volume 1 covers Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, and Mansfield Park, and then volume 2 covers Emma, Northanger Abbey, and Persuasion. And this is where Rodi launches a broadside against the depiction of Jane Austen as a, quote, a woman's writer, quaint and darling, doe-eyed and demure, parochial if not pastoral, and dizzily, swooningly romantic, the inventor and mother goddess of chicklet, end quote. Instead, he sees her as a sly subversive, a clear-eyed social Darwinist, and the most unsparing satirist of her century. He combs through the first 3 novels in Austen's canon with the aim of charting her growth as both novelist and humorist, and shattering the notion that she's a romantic of any kind. This is going to be a lot of fun, and I totally agree. Just by reading her personal letters, yeah, she was not demure Auntie Jane, despite what her nieces and nephews during the Victorian period tried to tell everybody. She was not dear Aunt Jane. She was definitely a sly subversive, in my opinion. Hey friends, Editing Shannon here. There was another book that I wanted to show you. It was probably the one I was most excited about, and I completely forgot to pull it out and add it to the stack. So instead of 10 books, there's actually 11 books. And this one is Jane Austen, The Secret Radical by Helena Kelly. And I'm so excited about this. Basically, she's doing a rereading of the work. And let's see, this person says she turns them upside down, shaking out the petticoats and love stories to find a dark, politically motivated underbelly. Beneath the drawing room chatter and matchmaking, Kelly points us towards Austen's carefully woven in ideas and opinions on, among others, the deadliness of marriage and motherhood, corruption in the church, and the debilitating poverty caused by enclosure of common lands. Yes, basically just going all into Jane Austen's works and pulling out how she was a secret radical, putting it into her works. And she knew all these things firsthand, specifically the deadliness of marriage and motherhood. 2 of her sisters-in-law were constantly pregnant, consistently pregnant, and then died in childbirth with the last child, obviously. Their bodies just wore out. So she was a witness to all of this. And I fully believe, okay, I fully want to hope that she was doing this intentionally. Okay, so back to the regular video. So that's it. 10 nonfiction books about Jane Austen, her works, and her historical time period. Have you read any of these? Do you know of any nonfiction books about her, her works, or Regency England or Georgian England that you think I should check out? Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. So that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining, and have a great day. Bye.